Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the really high-stakes conflict currently tearing through the Manistee City Fire Department. You know, if you grew up watching the classic 1970s TV show Emergency, you probably picture paramedics like John Gage and Roy DeSoto leaping into Squad 51 to save the day, right? It was pure adrenaline, no questions asked, and definitely no bureaucratic red tape. But in the real world of modern municipal management, things are just a whole lot more complicated than a 45-minute television plot.
It's a seriously intense situation, and it forces us to ask a crucial, deeply human question before we even look at the municipal budgets and the white papers. What happens when the people tasked with saving lives, the modern-day Johns and Roys out there on the front lines, actually need saving themselves?
So, we're going to map out this multi-layered conflict objectively today. Here's our agenda. 1. The call volume crisis. 2. The M for a proposal. 3. The reality of attrition. 4. The whistleblower audit. And 5. A community at crossroads.
Let's move right into Section 1, the call volume crisis, a system under pressure.
Here in Manistee, Michigan, which is this really beautiful city of about 6,000 residents, the fire department is facing just an unprecedented surge in demand, and it's largely driven by an aging population. Much like the crews of the 1970s had to adapt to the brand new world of paramedic protocols, Manistee is adapting to a modern reality where the medical alarms literally do not stop ringing.
And the core issue here is totally undeniable. According to the administration's 2025 white paper, EMS calls now account for a staggering 80% of all emergency responses. We aren't just talking about structural fires anymore. We are talking about a massive, relentless medical caseload that absolutely dominates the daily schedule.
To put that into perspective, over the past 2 decades alone, emergency call volume in Manistee County has jumped by 37%. I mean, that places an immense strain on the physical personnel, the wear and tear on the apparatus, and of course, the city's general fund budgets.
Which brings us to Section 2, the M for a proposal, a vision for the future. To address this growing emergency, the city administration and local chiefs drafted a bold new vision.
So the crucial point here is their solution, the MFRA proposal. That stands for the Manistee Fire and EMS Response Authority. The plan essentially aims to consolidate regional departments under a single command structure. It focuses on cross-training personnel, sharing vital resources across municipal lines, and shifting toward proactive community risk reduction. Basically, think of it as upgrading the entire regional dispatch and response system to work as one highly efficient, unified entity.
The administration's white paper frames this as a totally necessary evolution. They're arguing that modern fire services have to focus just as much on keeping people out of the hospital as getting them there. They envision a department that actively connects frequent callers with mental health professionals and social workers, integrating social support directly into the emergency response framework.
Now let's look at Section 3, the reality of attrition, pushback, and pain.
See, this is where that polished, strategic vision of the white paper really collides with a messy, painful reality on the ground. Inside the Manistee City Fire Department, the push for this grand regional expansion happened at the exact same time the core city operation experienced severe staffing depletion. It's essentially like trying to build a shiny new high-tech Station 51 while the roof of your current firehouse is actively caving in.
Whistleblowers and concerned citizens pointed out that the department started the year with 8 employees, but then quickly plummeted to just 5. That is a massive operational hit for a small, tight-knit team running exhausting 24-hour shifts.
And this divide is perfectly captured in how the two sides define a single, incredibly loaded word, attrition.
The administration softly cites attrition as a standard, controlled budgetary tool to manage a pinched general fund. Basically, they're just choosing not to fill an open role. On the other hand, furious citizens at the April 2026 council meeting redefined it completely. They brought up the literal dictionary definition, aggressively calling it the act of weakening or exhausting personnel through a toxic, unsustainable environment. Citizens argued that cutting the fire department's budget by $105,000 creates massive safety concerns due to fatigue and unfillable absences, and they emphatically pointed out that the department is actually the city's highest revenue earner, bringing in $300,000 in EMS funds. It is a really stark financial contrast. When John and Roy were running back-to-back medical calls on TV, they didn't have to worry if their overtime was going to bankrupt the city, right? But in Manistee, the financial strain on the remaining medics is very real and highly scrutinized.
This public frustration soon evolved into a formal bureaucratic and legal challenge in Section 4, the whistleblower audit, ringing the alarm.
Consultant and retired Fire Chief John Dodson submitted formal notices to the city, initiating protected whistleblower activity to report suspected statutory violations. He basically pulled the fire alarm on the city's own regional plan.
Dodson's technical deficiency audit aggressively dissects the MFR proposal. He warns of regulatory vacuums regarding clinical oversight, massive fiduciary risks, and liability exposures. He points out they are applying the incorrect NFPA response standards, specifically 1710 versus 1720. He also notes potential negative impacts on property insurance ISO ratings, and even highlighted that a similar regional EMS model failed in the county back in 2017 for these exact reasons.
He alleges that leadership masked a pattern of severe mismanagement behind a false narrative of budgetary efficiency. Dodson is arguing that while the public was being sold on a future of expanded regional coordination, the internal engine of the department was essentially seizing up. Quote, the push for a district-wide expansion was being engineered at the exact same time the core city operation was imploding from within.
So how does a municipality reconcile these two completely opposing realities? Well, that brings us to Section 5, a community at crossroads, finding the balance.
The City Council transcripts from May 2026 show a deeply divided room. On one side, some demand a finance committee and raw data, arguing the department is stretched to a dangerous breaking point. On the other side, officials support the administration's ongoing efforts to adapt, noting that tight budgets unequivocally require shared regional resources and modernization. But what everyone actually agrees on is that the money is tight, the call volume isn't stopping, and something has to give. Council members have gone on record to emphasize that future funding will not be robust, meaning highly critical, difficult decisions about core municipal services are completely imminent.
And that leaves us with this final thought to consider. When balancing a city's ledger, what is the true cost of public safety? Will regional consolidation save Manistee's emergency services, or merely mask an internal collapse? It's a question that would probably make the crew of Squad 51 incredibly glad they only had to deal with the medical emergencies and not the municipal ones. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I hope this helped to clear up the complexities of the Manistee crisis. Keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.